Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. As I go through a series of points and questions, I'd like you to keep something in the back of your mind, okay? I'm going to give you a couple of figures here. Just so as I go through this, my introduction here, please keep this figure in mind. You'll understand when I explain later. Right now in the province of Ontario, we are at 1 o'clock, we are burning 18,000 megawatts of power. Of that, wind is providing 304. Solar is providing 158. In total, wind and solar, billions and billions and billions of investment. Wind and solar in Ontario right now are providing 2.56% of our needs. A total, absolute, tragic failure of a government to impose that upon us. If you don't believe me, and I know there's always skepticism, please, and I urge you to do this. As a matter of fact, that the figures may have changed slightly at 2 o'clock. Simply go to ieso.ca, and there you will see for yourself. In fact, you can do it any day. Right now, I repeat, keep this in mind. Wind and solar, 42 major wind farms, millions of solar panels, 2.56% of our total needs in Ontario. What we have sacrificed for that. We have paid a terrible price, and continue to pay a terrible price in our battle against so-called global warming. One of the questions I have for you is, in your opinion, is it worth the price? Now, let's very quickly just sum up a few of the aspects of this price that I am talking about, the price that we are paying trying to switch to green energy. Tens of thousands of lost jobs. We all know about that. Billions of lost dollars, tens of billions of lost dollars, investment dollars from foreign and domestic investors as we cripple oil and gas industry and manufacturing. Nearly $17 billion a year sucked from taxpayers' pockets to pay for oil from Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, United States, and recently from Russia. $17 billion is sucked out of this country every year for foreign oil while they go jobless in the oil fields in Alberta. Skyrocketing electrical bills. We now have in Ontario the highest electrical rates anywhere in North America except for California, which also, by the way, used to try to rely on wind power. Carbon taxes driving up the cost of everything, including clothing, food. I don't have to tell you the kind of increases we have seen, the inflation that is crippling this country. We have a crumbling healthcare system as we pour billions into building windmills and solar panels and funding green energy projects of God knows how many kind. Instead of hiring more nurses, building more long-term care, providing more workers so that people who are ill can stay in their own homes, and building more hospitals, we have instead paid people to install better windows in their homes, build windmills, solar panels, $800 million to a steel plant in Ontario so that it can green up its processes. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. A terrible and mounting debt that we will never pay off. We have left this debt for our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, much of it because we shut down all of the income or much of the income from oil and gas. And I could go through all the litany of all the other things that we have done. And now, this latest tragedy, our inability to provide Europe with desperately needed natural gas and oil, which, if we had pipelines and had built natural gas plants, liquefied natural gas, we could have been able to help them. And thus, in the process, we could have perhaps helped the Ukraine. Uh, I mean, it's a terrible price. And for what? 2.56% of our needs right now. Despite everything else, all the money we have spent, all of the attention, all of the energy paid on greening things, our emissions continue to go up. In just 2 weeks' time, I have to remind you that the cost of everything will go up again as they add yet another carbon tax. April 1st, no April joke. Our food banks can't keep up with the demand. And after all is said and done, tens of billions that we pour into green energy has done nothing. If there, in fact, there is global warming, it has done nothing to curb it in any way. And of course, the overriding question, whether Canada even contributes to global warming, whether Canada actually contributes any CO2 to the atmosphere. It is my belief, and I'm not alone in this, and anybody that's ever traveled across this country probably shares my belief, and that is that with all of the forests, the lakes, the streams, the wheat fields, the vast pasture lands that we have, I seriously doubt if this country produces more CO2 than we soak up. I seriously suspect, and I believe many of you do as well, that our forests and streams and lakes and vast open fields soak up far more CO2 than we could possibly emit in a very, 33, 34, 5 million people in this vast, vast country. I mean, have you ever drive from Ottawa to Orillia? We used to do this quite often. I mean, it's just go through. How about just driving through the province of Ontario? 3 days of nothing but forests, lakes, streams, and swamps. Lots of mosquitoes too. How can we possibly be contributing more CO2 than those forests, etc., are soaking up? I don't believe that we can. But what the hell? I'm not a scientist. But despite this, despite crippling our economy, depriving vital services such as healthcare and the military, allowing them to crumble and rust, driving thousands of people into the food banks, and leave poor Ukraine all alone to fight off the monster. For what? For what? For what? What's your belief? Does global warming even concern you? do you believe it? I personally believe that the planet has been warming for over 1 million years. The glaciers melted after all. The huge oceans that it created when it melted, they've pretty well drained off. Excuse me. So there's still some slight warming. But the question is, we humans, are we contributing? And even how about bringing it closer to home? Are we in Canada contributing? Because you know what? Of all of the nations out there, this country probably has suffered more. Our economy has been crippled more than any other nation on earth, I believe, in our so-called fight against green energy, because we've got a few zealots running the governments. Let's be honest. I've checked, and you can check as well. All you do is Google. Don't believe me. The Arctic right now has more ice today, well, actually yesterday, than it's had in 16 years. The oceans are not rising. In fact, there's now fear that they may be declining a little bit. Remember all of the stories, the scare stories about New York City going to be flooded, Miami going to be under 14 feet of water, etc. It's all bullshit. It's not true. It's not true. I remember years ago, Debbie and I were in London. We took a little cruise on the Thames. Thames is connected to the ocean. And I asked the captain, I got into a little conversation, recorded some of it, what he was doing about the rising waves. He said, the water's not rising here. He said, I dock, when I dock my boat, he says, he'd been at it like 30 years or something. He said, I, the dock, it's exactly the same. He said, there's sometimes the tides are higher than others, sometimes they're lower. It's all bullshit. But nonetheless, we continue to pour billions into it. Is it worth it? And how much of a concern to you is global warming? I mean, you know, I suppose you could buy the argument that some other nations may be affected. But how would Canada suffer if, let's say, we warmed up enough so that our temperature was about that of South Carolina? Like, would that be a bad thing for us? Why are we doing this? Has the time come to stop it? Has the time come to re-energize our energy industry, build the pipelines, supply the world with desperately needed oil and natural gas, put money back in our pockets, rebuild our military, rebuild our hospital and healthcare system? Has the time come to do that? Or should we continue to build more windmills and pay people to install better windows in their homes? Or provide also, I mean, one of the things that I really enjoy is paying people, giving people a rebate to buy $100,000 electric car. Electric car, fine, but why we have to subsidize that? But then we have to subsidize a lot of, including not just people who own big cars. We're subsidizing a lot of industries as well, so-called to, improve their, cut down on their emissions and so forth. Why? What difference does it make? Even if you buy all of this, you know that even if you don't believe that our forests are sucking up any of this, our lakes or streams, at the worst, this country is producing 1.6% of the world's global emissions. And for this, we're beggaring ourselves. Your comments, please. John, what have we got?
613-413-2217 is the phone number for your phone calls. Obviously, that's what a phone number is for phone calls. Thank you. As it comes out of my mouth, it dawns on me that's the stupidest thing I may have ever said into a microphone. You can text us as well. Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter, wherever you would ordinarily post your comments, post them there. We'll pop them up on the screen if I can, and I will read them to Lowell if I can. We begin with Kevin. He says, you ain't seen nothing yet. Just follow the money on this, he says. Joshua, our priorities are so backwards, we think we are ahead. Craig is on Facebook, and he chimes in to say, we don't mind investing in new technology, especially if it has any glimmer of hopes to be of significant advantage to us. However, wind and solar are not new at all. We've had them for over 30 years. It's long overdue to shut them down and move on. Ann says the Liberal government talks and talks and talks. Nothing gets done. Bullshitters. Lisa says we are taxed up the wazoo. Coraline, $450 million to build the Nation Rise wind turbine project in North Stormont, and another $1.8 million per month for the next 20 years. Can't really see it paying itself off or being profitable. Eileen, that's why we have to get rid of this PM. He does not have the intelligence to run a country. Remember what he's done to Canada come election time.
One of the things, as I'm listening, I appreciate the comments, but once again, I'm trying to find out your feelings about global warming. And so far, none of you have commented on that. Do you think that it is is it of serious concern to you? And on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place it? If it is of concern to you? And do you believe that Canada really is contributing to it? Or do you believe, as I do, that with our forests, streams, etc., that we're soaking up far more than we ever emit into the air? What's your feeling about global warming? I've been very honest. I believe that the planet has been warming up for the past several million years after the Ice Age, and will continue to do so. The question is, are we humans contributing to that? And even more local, are we in Canada contributing to that? And my main question is it worth it? Everything that we have paid, Not, and it's, by the way, it's not just the money that we have poured out. I talk about the crumbling healthcare system, military and desperate need, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also the divisions in this country. I mean, we are at each other's throats far more today than I can ever recall in my 85 years. And one of the reasons is this battle against green energy. It has turned the East against the West, etc. So it's not just the financial cost, folks. It's the cost. And how about human suffering? Our food banks can't keep up with it. So my main question is, in your opinion, is it worth it? All of that we have done, how serious was, and even if we are contributing 1.6%, is it worth all of the 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 terrible pain that we have put ourselves through? That's my key question. Go ahead, John, please.
To me, it's worth it if we can develop technologies that we can then sell. But no, we went all in on this. It's like we're sitting at a blackjack table, and we just took all of our chips away from healthcare, away from military, and said we are all in on green energy. And I don't understand why. Yes, I believe the planet has been warming slowly but surely since the beginning of time, and at some point we need to deal with it. Or do we? My question is, do we need to deal with it, or are we designed to adapt to our surroundings?
Well, I think that if you any student of history would know that yes, we have adapted.
Right.
I mean, somehow or other, humans were still able to survive the ice age. There was ice. I've said this many times before, and it's a fact. More than a mile high over where I am broadcasting and where you are right now, John.
Absolutely.
It gradually melted. It created a huge sea, the Champlain Sea, that lasted for millions of years. It gradually drained away until now all that's left of that is the Lake Champlain in northern New York. So, but through all of this, somehow or other, humans and other species have been able to survive and adapt. Go ahead, John, please.
All right, we are getting some direct answers to your question.
Good.
Craig says global warming is a hoax. Wayne moments ago says we cannot control the weather. We can control pollution. Chrissy is on Twitch. She says scale should be a 5 right now. Where are the priorities? Triage is what's going on in the world right now. Can we not just review again the future of global warming? On a scale of 1 to 10, Donald puts us at a 1. Go ahead, Lowell. Sorry.
Someone talked about pollution.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that the Liberal government has sold us is, the tax on pollution. CO2 is not pollution. It is an odorless, tasteless, sightless gas. And in fact, CO2 is a very weak acid. So it is not pollution. Pollution is, well, I think most people understand. I'll tell you what's pollution. When the province of Quebec dumps millions of liters of raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River. Now there's pollution for you. CO2 is not pollution. It's part of the atmosphere. It's a natural part of the atmosphere, along with oxygen, nitrogen, et cetera, et cetera. Shields. I have to get a word in here for our good friends at Shields. Once again, I want to talk about price. I did a little comparison myself today. And as I suspected, you will find that in a number of cases, not only is Shields very competitive when it comes to pricing, but actually beats some of the big box stores in their pricing. Not every time, but in many cases, yes. One of the reasons is cost of doing business in Pakenham is considerably below what it is in downtown Ottawa. Only makes sense to me, probably makes sense to you. They're top-notch service, huge warehouse with virtually everything you could possibly want when it comes to appliances. All the big brand names and some of the lesser names as well, different price ranges, colors, sizes, etc., etc. It's all there, easy to see, shields.ca, SCHEELS.ca. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
We've got a phone call. Barry is on the line at 613-413-2217. Barry, you are on live with Lowell Green. Go ahead, sir.
Imagine that. Barry, hi, Barry. Yes, sir.
Hey, Lowell.
What's your feeling?
Yeah, well, Lowell, I think this global warming and climate change, whatever, I think it's like you say, it's just a process in the earth. It's been happening for years. There's CO2, there's other gases and that come off of volcanoes in larger volumes than all the cars and all the vehicles on earth. I think that the politicians are just using it as an excuse to taxes and take more money away from people and either impoverish us or just keep us in our place where we can't do anything else but conform. And I would like to ask you a question. If our government, and I'm going to question the Premier's office on it, because a while ago I heard Doug Ford saying he was going to try and get rid of some of all of the red tape and stuff and bureaucracy of the Ontario government. But Ontario Hydro has specific laws made up that you can't go off the grid if you live out in the country. So if the government is so interested in green energy and green power and saving the world, then how come if you go out in the country somewhere, you've still got to get hooked up to Ontario Hydro by law?
No, that's not right, Barry. I know. In fact, I have a neighbor that's off the grid. A good friend of mine. That he's not on the grid. I don't know where you got that information.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
I've even heard Rob Snow say that you can't go off the grid. So there's a lot of.
Sure you can.
Sure you can. I guess Hydro's got a lot of us believing you can't do that. But also I heard that, like, say if you were out in the country and you bought property on a woodlot and you cut back into the woodlot, let's say you went back 1,000 feet into the lot property to build your house.
Yes.
That even if you have a private contractor come in and dig a trench and put in hydro cables underground out to the power pole on the main road, that Hydro will still come in and charge you for so many feet every.
Anyway, you know what, Barry, we got, as you know, we have limited time. I don't know about that, but I do know that you can certainly go out. How could they stop you? I mean, if you don't want to be on the grid, then you live the life of a hermit. There's lots of people in this country who live off the grid, sir.
Yeah, I know that, Law.
Yeah,
I've heard that the hunting camps are the only ones that can go off the grid legally.
No, I don't know where that information came from. Barry, let me ask you, we have to go on, but let me ask you this. Are you surprised that today, there's a decent breeze out there right now. The sun is shining a little bit, that at 1 o'clock today, wind and solar combined were providing only 2.56% of our needs. Does that surprise you?
Not at all, Lowell. It's not enough, and they spend way overspent on it just to line their own pockets and everything. I was on a farm one time out near Metcalfe where the farmer had solar and wind power. He had a small windmill, and he actually had a windmill.
Anyhow, Barry, you got to shorten it up here, buddy. Go ahead.
Okay, well, anyways, the farmer told me that he could not have enough power with what he had with the solar and the wind, that he still had to use propane for his fridge and stove.
Of course. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I don't know where this idea came that you can't go off the bridge.
I've heard that. I'm gonna look into that and get the specifics, because I've heard something similar to that too.
How could they stop you? I mean, we've got lots of people. In fact, he mentions, lots of hunting camps are up there, and they power themselves with propane or something. Go ahead, please. Got some more text.
Yeah, Terry says his brother lived off the grid for 10 years in Otter Lake. Coraline says apparently the bank won't give you a mortgage to build off the grid. So
well, that could be. I don't know.
Mixed feelings there. All right, direct answers to your questions, sir. We have some of them. Eileen says, that's a whole other thing. All right, Eileen, I'll finish. Well, I don't understand why Biden won't send Ukraine the Megs. He has sent other war machinery. All right, to your question. Coraline says, not concerned about global warming. And all I keep seeing is a post where Ottawa is surveying residents about the future of garbage collection, which is not even consider incineration. Satan's Playmate on Twitch says global warming is a scam. Ice is increasing in the Arctic. There's melting in the Antarctic, but it is due to volcanic activity as well as in Iceland.
No, actually, yeah, there's melting of some volcano. But the fact of the matter is, and check that. I mean, this is all of it. There are agencies, government agencies that monitor ice cover. Okay, today there is more ice in Antarctica than we have ever seen before since we began to keep data. Go ahead, please, John.
Craig, who I believe is in real estate, says he has a point. Once you've had hydro connected, it's next to impossible to void charges, even though you might not be consuming any hydro.
Oh, that's different.
that is different. And thank you, Craig. That's a little bit of clarity on that. And says the trouble is the lefties who support throwing all of this money to fight global warming do not understand how the world works, nor how little energy windmills and solar panels create. They just listen to the pap coming out of the CBC. There may well eventually be something to replace fossil fuels, but technology is not there yet. For now, we need fossil fuels to avoid freezing to death. To me, that's the real inconvenient truth.
Yeah, they certainly find this out in Europe, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
Europe would love to help Ukraine by stopping buying oil and gas from Russia, but they can't. I mean, can you imagine what would happen in Europe? Imagine what would happen in Germany. About 40% of its oil comes from Russia. Can you imagine what would happen if Germany was short 40% of all the oil it needed? I mean, it would cripple the country. I mean, these people who say, "Oh well, we can exist on windmill, solar panel, sustainable energy." They say, well, right today, folks, I just repeat once again, and I'm going to keep pounding this. Right today, this sustainable energy that we have spent billions creating are creating 2.56% of all of our needs. You know what? If you think that Ontario can get along with less than 3% of the power we need, well, then you're dreaming in freaking Technicolor. Go ahead, John.
Eric says the very last thing, if at all, in the next bout of election promises I want to hear about is green energy and global warming. Janet says, not concerned about so-called global warming. Lots of BS. Open the pipeline, she says. Let me get back to my notepad here. Doug says the planet goes through periods of warming and freezing ice age. Lisa says my 14-year-old is convinced climate change is a crisis and that if we don't do something to minimize the problem, future generations will be doomed. This is the narrative our kids are being taught.
Can I just address that? Yeah, the kids are being taught that. I don't know if you realize it or not, but Al Gore's famous documentary, so-called documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, that scared the bejabbers out of everybody and was played in many schools. It came out in 2006. We are now, in fact, we are now more than 20 years since they have been warning us that we only have another 5 or 6 years before the planet burns up. Al Gore predicted in his documentary that the Arctic would be totally free of ice in 2013. Well, here we are 9 years later, and there's more ice in the Arctic today than we've seen in 16 years. I mean, folks, I'm not making this up. These are facts available for anybody to see. You know, you don't believe, go to the Arctic and say, you think that there's no ice in the Arctic? Go ahead, please.
Corleen, my take on climate change. There were once woolly mammoths in Florida and Mexico and dinosaurs in Alberta.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Lots of them.
Glenn says, global warming, to quote Shakespeare, so much ado about nothing. Janet says, nope, the climate is always changing. I think we could KP. Sean says, global warming, climate change, or whatever they want to call it is not worth it. There is no proof that we are causing the earth to warm in Canada. Emissions do not stop at the border. And how do we know what is American and what is Canadian? Global warming to me is a big 2. That's 2 out of 10 on a scale, I believe. Gregory says the forces of nature are to be something to be odd. Our lakes and forests are probably immeasurable in how they contribute to the environment. Our contributions to wealth and economy are, however, very measurable. Let's remember, says this person, Canada was and still is a nuclear champion of technology. It's the bleeding hearts on the left that have shut them all down for a failed renewable energy.
You know, the hypocrisy, and I'm glad, the hypocrisy involved in this is astonishing. As you know, the province of British Columbia, which is North America's major exporter of coal, by the way, fought and continues to fight vehemently against the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Now, the Trans Mountain Pipeline would have brought a lot more oil to the West Coast, which then could be, and natural gas, excuse me, which then could be shipped to China so that China could get rid of some of the coal-fired plants and instead burn natural gas, which is much cleaner. But so here are the environmentalists saying they really care about the planet, the planet's ecology, etc., essentially stopping China from replacing coal with natural gas. The hypocrisy is just astonishing. Go ahead, John.
We've got a lot of comments. We have very little time. Here we go. Cheryl says global warming is BS. How about they spend money on healthcare, raising the old age pension? How about supporting our veterans? Christine says interim hybrid model until infrastructure is in place. Put green energy jobs place in Alberta. Does anyone remember the thick line of brown smog across Toronto before the Four Sisters were blown up? Rosemary says it was Indigenous chiefs who told NASA that the Earth's axis had shifted. They also stated that was what was responsible for the environmental changes and not man-induced climate change.
What the hell do the Indigenous chiefs know about climate? I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. I have to move on, folks. Have a good weekend. I just want to remind you once again, okay? Right now, well, at 1 o'clock, and, if some of you want to check IESO.ca, really easy to do. But at 1 o'clock today, wind and solar were producing in Ontario 2.56% of our total needs. For this, we have sacrificed so much. Terrible, terrible, tragic failure. We'll be back Monday. Thank you.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.